Welcome back to Season 6 of the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falasz, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again this week. Today I want to talk about something that can literally crush your business if it's not done well. And it presents us with a little bit of a dichotomy. It's simultaneously vague, yet really specific. It can either make your organization disjointed, creating constant turnover, and lead to a downtrend in business value, or it can turn into a machine that runs really smoothly, and it can help increase revenue, retention, productivity, and your bottom line. And it's a word that we all throw around, and that's culture. We've all heard people talking about their culture and their opinion about how their business has, I'm air quoting, great culture, but rarely do we hear that word defined. And what's more, I think owners seldom understand how it affects their business. Some may even feel that talking about culture makes them appear overly flexible or without any real control over the relationship between their business and its people, or maybe even overly salesy in terms of recruiting. And owners typically go from what they know firsthand, what they've lived in their own day to day, which is understandable. But we also know that this is often not enough to get a really good handle on the three things that we all need to wrap our heads around. And that is what culture is, what it's not, and how do we use it to grow our business. And in order to really use it, we first need to kind of peel off that fluffy layer around the term culture. And to help us do that, because he sees how culture impacts healthcare practices, I have Adin Bradley here with me today, Polaris Fractional COO and Strategic Consulting Executive. Adin, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be back.
Good to have you as always. We always have a great discussion, and I'm sure today will be no different than the others because I have questions around a recent LinkedIn post you did. So I wanted to get you on here and see if we can sort of dive into this culture thing a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, love to.
Okay, so your post said a lot of healthcare leaders think that strong culture equals being soft, and it doesn't. Can you go into that a little bit? What does that mean, really?
Yeah, I got a lot of feedback on this, which is really good because I think we often define it differently, and we think that it makes us quote unquote soft when in reality what we are is creating some stability. So, culture in a group dental practice setting isn't abstract. It's one of the most sort of powerful performance levers you have because it directly influences the behaviors that drive revenue, cost, and scalability. And if you think of culture as the multiplier on your operating model, the same strategy with a different culture, better culture,
Mhm.
or worse culture drives very different outcomes.
Yeah.
So it's one of the biggest performance levers in a multi-site organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, before we get any further, why don't we first define culture? And I'll let you do that because you see this day in and day out with your clients. So I'll let you start with your definition of culture.
Yeah, so I define it one way in my mind, and I kind of looked at different definitions. And the one that I really thought was the most impactful is that culture is really a shared set of behaviors, values, and expectations within everyday actions, right? That determine how we deliver patient care, how teams interact with each other, and how decisions are made across all locations. That's really what your culture is. Is it one of inclusivity? Is it one of micromanagement? Is it one where people are not empowered? And that really makes a determination of what your culture is. And what I did add is that it's not what you write on the wall because you can write anything. It's really your behaviors, your values, and what you do every day. That is who you are. That's your culture.
It's not one of those live, laugh, love stickers that
No,
But
no,
not
no, it's not that. It's not the smiley face from Forrest Gump when he wipes his face. It's not any of that stuff, you
no,
know?
definitely not, definitely not. Well, you mentioned performance levers. So,
Mhm.
why don't you tell us a little bit about how culture can be a performance lever? Because I feel like you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, I think that when we think of the levers that we pull, we think of clinical philosophy, team behavior, and environment. What is our leadership style like? Is it transparent versus top down? Do we really enhance the patient experience? Is it like relationship based with the patient, or is it transactional? Meaning, is it driven by dollars? That'll drive people away. And then what's the decision making framework? Like, are we making decisions in the short term because we're desperate? Or are we willing to put stable processes in place that will yield dividends down the road and allow us to scale? So, the best group practices align their culture around three things, and then the fourth is achieved. One is just doing the right thing clinically every time.
Mhm.
The second one is taking care of the team. I mentioned the team in particular because when the team feels empowered and like they're cared about, that transcends into the patient experience. And then how we execute operationally. Does everyone know what their position is? Do they define it the same way? There's no ambiguity. And then when you do all of those, Jamie, profit follows. Now, if you try to do it from the bottom up, focusing only on profit, you will start to cut corners. You will do things in a near term. You kind of negotiate against yourself. I'm just going to do it this one time when you know it's not the right decision. And then the culture erodes and then it basically devolves into something that gets you further away from your goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, if we're going to break that down a little bit, in fact, from your post, strong culture is one of the biggest performance levers in a multi site organization. I think we can all agree on that. Now, I know you see this in your practical day to day. What do you see? Like, what are some of the recurring themes that you see over and over?
So, great question. And it always gets, your questions always, get me thought provoking here. I it plays out over and over, and it's generally a common denominator in why owners call us because something's missing in their organization. They just cannot put their finger on it. Like, when I was one or two offices, things were great. Now I'm six and seven, and the wheels are coming off because we have not been able to scale processes, clinical excellence, culture, which is specifically what we're talking about. So, those leaders, the owners, founders, and principals that prioritize trust, clinical autonomy, which is a big one, and team alignment over short term decisions and production build stronger organizations. And, I made a comment to you one time where what you do today, those one offs become precedent. And a strong culture and a good leader means sometimes saying yes and or no, knowing that that is what's going to be precedent. And I always say the team members are watching. So I'll give you a perfect example. I see this where we have someone who's been there a while, they kind of want like an exception to a rule, right? And I always say if you say yes, that is your new policy. That is your new precedent. Because if you say no to the next two or three people, they are going to refer back to that instance where you made an exception. And that exception down the road is going to cost you. Now, is that in every case? No, because there's exceptions to the exceptions. But in the grand scheme of things, if it really is only solving for the individual and it's not in the best interest of the organization and it's going to increase the burden on others, a good culture and good leadership makes tough decisions. And with that should accompany the why. I'm using this in air quotes if we don't show this part. The why.
Okay.
We can accommodate that because, or we can't accommodate that because. People may not always agree with the tough decisions, Jamie, but if they at least understand and we are transparent, they can respect it.
That makes sense. And to me, this sounds like having good boundaries, right?
Mhm.
Protecting your peace while you keep some structure in place, but there has to be room for growth and flexibility. Like if you've been doing something, and here's one of my pet peeves, well, we do it this way because we've always done it this way.
Right.
No, if there's a better way, let's explore it. Does it work? Is it scalable? Can we measure it? everything that goes along with it. So, sounds like we're talking about boundaries a little bit when we're
Mm.
talking about culture. Now, you mentioned a minute ago leaders who prioritize trust, clinical autonomy. You mentioned that. If we're protecting clinical autonomy, let's maybe give some examples. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah. I speak to docs all the time because I want to understand what drives them, where their comfort level is, and most importantly, do they feel supported by the team? And does the team feel supported by the doc?
Mhm.
So, clinical autonomy is the ability to treatment plan in a way that best serves the patient. It's not high pressure. It's not the S word sales, which I've
Yeah.
heard people use. And when you build trust with the patient and you solve for what they're telling you their ailments are, and then obviously what our diagnostics say, treatment planning really becomes a solution to a problem. And the money will follow because they trust in us. They value the work. When we go in heavy handedly and make it all about sales, and the doc feels like they're pressured to do that, they lose that autonomy. They're like, I would not treatment plan it this way.
Right.
We have to trust that the doc knows the situation, they know the patient, and they know how they will respond to treatment or the cost in the best manner. You also build credibility with the patient, and the patient now wants to refer us to friends and family and brag about the treatment that they got.
Mhm.
I've been in organizations where they refer to treatment coordination as quote unquote sales.
Oh,
And
no.
I just cringe.
Ah, so do I.
And the patient senses that it's high pressured, it's not really about them. And here's what I tell one of the favorite groups that I love working with are treatment coordinators, and I say this all the time. The more the patient is speaking, the more chance you are going to have that treatment plan accepted. Because at the end of that should be, we are going to make you feel better, and this is what we're going to do to solve that problem. And the patient's like, wow, you're going to solve this thing that I've been uncomfortable with for weeks or months or decades? Or, and the answer is yes. We're not pushing more onto them. So, and then so we avoid that over treatment pressure. And I say to docs, treat the patient like you're treating your favorite relative where money was not an issue.
Mhm.
This is how I would want to treat my favorite person in the world. If you do that with every single patient, I say this often, you'll make money in spite of yourself because people will trust you and they'll accept treatment. And the last part of that, it kind of goes along with this, is we talked about the clinical autonomy is investing in the team,
Oh,
especially when
yeah.
it's not an easy decision because the doc, I mentioned this earlier, the docs need support. They need support from hygiene. They need support from the front desk, from sterile tech to the assistants, all of that. All of them are in the same cycle of service. So if investing in additional help, if it's additional equipment, additional technology, additional team members that can answer the phone, whatever drives patients into the schedule that docs can see, docs should never feel pressured and in hurried, for lack of a better word, because they don't have the resources around them. And then the team in turn should not feel pressured from the docs because they don't have what they need. So
Mhm.
whether it be technology, FTEs, maybe a third party with AI being introduced that can do reappointments, reactivations, answer phones, and take some of that away. So we're more bonded to the, no pun intended, to the patient themselves. And then the docs feel really supported. So I think, just quickly, clinical autonomy, the ability to treatment plan the way you feel best, avoiding over treatment pressure, meaning we're not driven by just dollars. We're driven by doing the best by our patients, and then investing in our team, which is making sure that the docs have all the resources they need and that the team themselves has all the resources that they need so they can do their job and support the operation at the same time.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, and all of that has to work together at the same time from location 1 in order for this to work at location 2, 5, 10, 12, 50.
Yep.
You have to be able to have good culture. I don't even need to air quote that this time, but you've gotta have it at location 1. If you don't have it dialed in there, you gotta start over. You need to get some support.
Yeah, and again, we when you and I chat, I often say, like 5 offices is about the inflection point. It's the
Yeah.
inflection point with a lot of different things, but culture is sort of the umbrella term that fits all of the all just all of the behaviors that we do every single day. And I'm with a new group now that is gonna be one of the most challenging that we ever had, and strangely enough, I must need to get, like, kind of a mental check because 'cause I'm having the most fun with them because we literally have to tear this down to the studs, and I said to the owner right off the rip, I said, "The inmates are running the asylum here, so
No.
you have to get really comfortable, getting uncomfortable with the fact that we're gonna have to make some really hard decisions." If if our exit interviews keep finding that our people are leaving after 2 to 3 months because our onboarding is terrible, they don't know their role is, and more importantly, the same names keep popping up that's made their lives miserable, we need to make a change, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a
Exactly.
different result.
Yeah.
And I said that we are gonna stop just hiring the first person that we talk to just to fill a seat. We're gonna start being more intentional, and if that means making a hard decision of moving people out that don't believe in our culture, they don't live our values, they need to work elsewhere.
Mhm.
So that is definitely something that we're working on, and if, if you want, we can talk about short and long-term outcomes of prioritizing this because they really do matter. What
Yeah,
you
why
make
don't we do that? Because, well, first of all, you'll have to come back as we see things roll out with that organization that you're mentioning, because I think there'd be a lot to learn there for our audience members, and we know you're not alone. If you're having issues, very good likelihood that someone else is having the same experience. So I want to have you back to talk about that when things start to iron out there and, the ship's going in the right direction. But yeah, let's talk about the short term and the long term outcomes of prioritizing culture.
Yeah, let me just say one thing. When I'm on, they're gonna be on with me, and they're gonna talk about what day 1 looked like and, like, day
Yeah,
90 and day 180.
I would
And
love
and
that.
yeah, and it's gonna be a completely different organization.
Good.
Though kinda touched on this before, Jamie. When you're thinking short term, you know, you might get better margin, you might see a little bit of better cash flow because you're stretching that rubber band as tight as it'll go,
Yeah,
and it'll eventually snap. So in the near term, you might say it's working because I've saved dollars, and you may save dollars because you don't have enough team members. You're really, really getting aggressive on the treatment planning, and you haven't seen a downstream effect of attrition and not getting patients back because they don't feel good in your practice. They feel like they're a number. Okay.
yeah,
And you'll slowly start to find within a couple months that that margin that you picked up from those short-term decisions where money was a priority will start to fall off. And you're like, "Gosh, where are my patients? I'm churning more than I'm bringing in, and I'm just not getting the same number of referrals," because the best ambassadors that you have for the organization are your team and your patients. And when they stop fighting for you, you'll feel that not today or tomorrow, but on their next iteration of an appointment, whether it's 6 months for a cleaning or a yearly checkup, and all of a sudden they're not there, that's when
hmm
you'll feel it. What are the long-term outcomes? This is everything improves from the retention to patient experience to growth. I talked about high turnover. When patients see the same folks over and over, the same doc, the same hygienist, the same assistants, there's a familiarity there. And I've mentioned on other podcasts, I don't know if this goes for everybody, but it definitely goes for me. My relationship with the hygienist is stronger than the doc. Okay. Because they are the ones that I see the most. I see them every 4 or 5 months for my cleaning. They kinda know who I am. They yell at me for drinking red wine, and then, then the doc comes in.
never.
Yeah, and then the doc comes in, and he's like, "Everything looks good," but the hygienist is the one that I'm like, that's where my relationship is with, and I think a lot of people feel that. Also, when you see the same faces up front and they know you, "Hi, Miss Jamie, how are you? It's been a while. How's things going?" You feel like they care about me. Why would I ever leave? Dentistry is extremely commoditized. Someone doesn't get an appointment right away, they call the dentist up the road, right? They have a bad experience, they call the dentist up the road. You have someone that you really trust, you may wait a little while longer to get in, or know that when you go in, you're gonna have, scans, x-rays, and treatment done because they're really trying to improve your oral health, which overall is your physical health, and that you know that what they tell you, you're just at the point where, "Okay, I trust you." And then, retention of our staff I've talked about, and then what I just talked about bleeds into that patient retention part. They trust us, they wanna stay with us. When you get to that point, you have really achieved what I would call success in having strong values, strong team members, and all of that is built around a strong culture. And you will see over time, each office incrementally gets more profitable. And in the aggregate, you're like, holy smokes, all these long term investments that we make have really added up, right? So the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You
Mhm.
won't see the results today, but I will tell you that if you go in the short term, in 6 months, you'll be further behind. If you take the long term strategy, in 6 months to a year, you will notice significant difference that is repeatable and sustainable, and you can continue to grow on that and optimize if you buy another practice or you do a de novo, or more importantly, if you decide to monetize your business, this makes you exponentially more valuable because you are lessening risk for a potential partner.
Oh, yeah, if you're going to sale, this has to be nailed down. But I'm gonna jump back to patient experience and that trust factor. I saw that as a hygienist, I saw the same patients for 20 years. I saw their children,
Yeah.
which was really rewarding for me. And at the end of the day, I know this is not always possible. The reality of it is you don't often get the same hygienist for 20 years. However, there's an element of that trust and that relationship that is very reproducible if you work at it. And if every team member is a cheerleader for the practice, is a cheerleader for the patients and the patient experience, and the doctors do the same, like we're the best warm-up band for the dentist, right? We've all got to have that one cohesive relationship that we call culture in order for this to work. Location after location, no matter where you are.
I couldn't state it any better than you just did, and I think it's a great message to everyone out there to check themselves and ask yourself, have you had the same team for a long time?
Mhm.
Are you at the end of the month, are you a net negative in patient flow, meaning more people left that are established than came in? Are you churning docs? Are you churning front staff? If you are, look inward. And then when you're done looking inward, call me so we
Yeah.
can talk and get to some real hard truths about how the organization is running. Now, if you want to run a lifestyle business and make just enough to pay for your fancy car and country club membership and have all the neighbors call you doc, then have at it. But
Yeah.
if you are genuinely trying to grow a successful group practice and are willing to invest back into your people, into the practice, because you have a vision down the road that you're working backwards to today, give us a call, give me a call. And let's just walk through what your vision is, where you're at, look for some blind spots, and see how we can help you achieve those goals.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to self-reflect when you feel like you're stagnant or you're losing people or you're losing patients or you're losing money. That's really uncomfortable, but I think I can make a promise that if you do that, you're going to learn something about yourself and let Aiden take a look at the business too. He's honest.
Yeah, yeah, I'll let
What we
everyone
like
know.
about you.
It's a day of crushing hopes and dreams. It's
Sign me
look
up.
yeah, it's look in the mirror time and really assessing it. But you know what? You know what's interesting? You see a lot of these founders in deep thought, and you can almost see that little cloud over their head, what they're thinking,
Yeah.
and they're often thinking, "How did I get here?" Right? And I can unwind this, like, if I do a few things. And often, I'll talk to some people for a year or 2, like, I'm not ready," and then finally, I get that one call, and the hands are thrown up in the air, they're pleading no mas, they're like, "I need help," and I'm like, "Well, we can help. I wish you would have called, like, a year ago, we'd be way
Yeah.
further ahead." But if you feel like you're even heading towards the ditch, let's chat, let's talk about it because consolidation is happening rapidly. And I can almost guarantee to any founder, owner that's listening to this call is is getting themselves surrounded by private equity groups that were private before, doctor founded, debt funded practices that have partnered. And if you are not staying ahead of the curve
Yeah.
and investing in your team, your people, your docs, your autonomy, your culture, you're going to get eaten alive.
I was
And
just gonna say that. Absolutely. It's going to impact your value, and I'm gonna tie you back to what you said about not being ready. If you think you're not ready, you were probably ready months ago.
right.
You have
Yeah.
to be ready now if you're thinking of making a move because it will impact your value.
There is no doubt about that, and we have seen groups that have actually had to delay that really did wanna monetize it, had to delay to fix some major issues because our role as M&A advisors is to get top dollar and
Sure.
then, ultimately a premium. And the way to do that is to make sure that you have created operational and clinical efficiencies to the point where you are at max value and you've become really attractive to the market. What you don't want to be is a distressed group that someone's going to pick
Mm,
you up really cheap and then they are going to gain all of the upside that you left on the table. And
mhm.
that is a very sad story to see founders just kind of throw their arms up and give things away because they're just burned out. We help with that burnout and kind of rejuvenate the whole team. So it's what we do, it's what we're good at, it's what we've proven ourselves to be, and for me personally, get a lot of fulfillment of watching that change in culture and vibe and really seeing people become better versions of themselves and really enjoying their work and seeing that transcend down into the patient.
Yeah, that's really rewarding, and I wish I had more of a glimpse into your day to day because I would love to just even be a fly on the wall
I'll tell you
and
where to
watch
meet me
that.
next time, Jamie,
Okay,
and
I'm
then
down.
I'll have you check out the hygiene department and tell me if everything's clicking
Yes.
out there.
I like it. I like it. I'd be in my element. Well, the one thing I want to say is I want to tie this back to what we originally said and exactly what you said in your LinkedIn post. And I'll quote here because I put it in front of me for a reason. This isn't soft leadership. Like we've taken that fluffy layer away. It isn't soft leadership, it's operational strategy. And if we don't have that, the value of your business will suffer. I can't say it enough. And your enjoyment of your career will suffer as well. I mean, that's obviously a side effect, but thank you.
100% correct. 100%.
So, a lot of thoughts that came out of that short LinkedIn post, Aiden. I appreciate it, but it did get me thinking. And I'm glad we had a chance to dive into that word culture because everybody uses it. And I'll say we all overuse it, but most people don't really know what it means or how it impacts their business.
We're going to be sharing some more of these LinkedIn posts to kind of spurn conversation and get people thinking. So for those that have seen the post or are gonna look at the post based on listening to this podcast, look forward to some more posts that talk about challenges and opportunities, mostly about opportunities and how to get your practice running much better than it is today.
Yeah, for sure. I'll actually link to it in our show notes so that people can also connect with you on LinkedIn if they're not already.
Perfect.
All right, Aiden, great conversation today. Great to have you on the show. And to our audience, we love the questions that you all send us, so keep them coming and we'll keep delivering the content that you ask for. As always, if you want to learn about any of our Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic we haven't covered that you'd like to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com and be sure to visit our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com where you'll find weekly articles to grow and support your healthcare business along with access to all of our podcast episodes, events, and a whole lot more. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague. Be sure to leave us a rating on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.